What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about Lucid, more specifically their Q2 earnings. So in case you don't want to listen to a 1 hour earnings call, I wanted to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything that you need to keep in mind. Before we get into any of that, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. And I just wanted to kind of say as an asterisk what I interpret as a positive or as a negative. Some people might completely disagree with, because everything in general, if you think about it, could be spun either way. So this is just my interpretation. But starting off with some of the positives, they did maintain the late 2026 for the midsize. There was one retail posed question right here: is the midsize platform still on target for production late 2026? Are deliveries expected to start 2026 or 2027? And Mark did answer saying production is going to start 2026, deliveries 2027. So kind of a positive. I don't know about the 2027. Maybe people wanted it truly to move up. But even this right here, did the acquisition of the Nikola facility allow midsize to be brought forward at all? And Mark said no, which kind of begs the question why they did it. But nonetheless, this is a positive. Aside from that though, regarding the hands-free update, they also did say that there is more updates coming over the next couple of quarters. So that shows that they are still continuously innovating behind the scenes. So I kind of saw that as a positive. They're not really just sitting dormant and just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. They're still continuously updating. When one analyst did ask about this, so the Motor Intelligent July 2025 report, which did signal that there was 0 Gravity sales, Mark kind of laughed and said that this is absolutely wrong, then that there was actual Gravities sold in July. He didn't give an amount, but he said that this is wrong. So in my opinion, I see that as a pretty good positive. And then a couple other things right here. So they talked quite significantly throughout the earnings about Uber, and obviously rightfully so. That was a big catalyst for them. But they did mention that Uber actually reached out to Lucid to partner. It wasn't the other way around. Most likely, the PIF was acting as a little bit of a puppet master behind the scenes between Uber and Lucid. So in case you don't know, the PIF does have a pretty substantial position in both, but nonetheless, Uber actually reached out to Lucid, so that does validate Lucid's technology. So again, I see that as a positive. And this 𝗪𝗓𝗡𝗘𝗖𝗧, if I'm saying that, I totally said that wrong, but nonetheless, we had some further updates. So this does look like this whatever marketing campaign is going to be starting September 2025. His main purpose is to push the Gravity, because Lucid mentioned that they want to have a good foundation and a base leading into the midsize. So again, those are some of the positives that at least stood out to me. Again, there might be a couple others. If there was any other very strong positives, let me know in the comments below. I know there's a lot of posts coming out, even this kind of talking about a lot of the positives in there. But in my opinion, I think what I mentioned kind of is a good summarization of all that. Getting to some of the negatives, going back to the same screen, prior guidance was 20,000. They did lower it to between 18 to 20. And I know some people are already saying, well, technically they didn't lower it since it still shows 20. In the eyes of Wall Street, this is a reduction. So just be somewhat aware of that. They still stuck to the whole, hey, we have sufficient amount of liquidity well into 2026, that whole mentality, which is completely wrong. And so ultimately, they are going to need to dilute end of Q3, possibly Q4. So just keep that as well in mind. They did dilute a significant amount. So just looking kind of here, so they did have roughly around 2.3 billion in outstanding shares at the end of June 30th, 2024. And they did end this same period with just over around 3 billion. So they did dilute 750 million shares over the last 1 year. So there's a lot of dilution happening. And I know a lot of people are like, well, we kind of knew that. I don't think people realized to this magnitude. But again, going back to it, they will be needing to dilute in the next little bit. They also did lower their Capex from 1.4 to 1.1, or between 1.1 and 1.2. This does also signal a slowing occurring within their business. So that's again something to definitely keep in mind, because at the same time, their margins really did get hit. And this is something I really stressed to a lot of individuals to pose questions. Retail posed questions about the tariffs. So CFO, can't remember his name at the top of my head, but ultimately he did state that this was largely because of tariffs. So they did cite between 8 to 15%, and going forward, they're kind of citing for it to be on the low end of 8%. This is also another negative because technically they must not be aware of it, but a lot of this margin being hit was because of Canadian tariffs. That just was increased to 35%. So this is actually going to be a little bit worse off going forward. And what they did guide, so keep in mind, they guided between 8 to 15 last earnings, and this earnings, they said it will be on the low end, roughly around 8. So with the tariffs just increasing, that means that they're wrong. So again, that's not always that great. Going back over here, this was a positive, but when it comes down to the whole Uber type of scenario, that is going to be launching, and so they're going to be starting to fulfill those sales late 2026. So meaning Uber does want the midsize. So that, in my opinion, was a new piece of information that we did not know. In Lucid's previous PRs, Lucid mentioned that Uber and this whole deal would be ideal for the Gravity. Turns out, in my opinion, they won't be fulfilling any Gravities. Because if you think about it, Uber doesn't. Why would Uber want like a Gravity price point, or potentially even Air? They want low price, and so that is the midsize. So at the end of the day, we had a little bit of clarity for that, which in my opinion wasn't all that great. For face value, even looking at their earnings, they did have a triple miss. So negative 22 cents for the earnings per share was the forecast, came in at negative 28. Revenue forecast was 262 million, came in at 259. And they did mention as well regarding tariffs that they lost roughly around 55 million because of that. So that puts it in perspective on how damaging tariffs are. It wasn't just tariffs, it was that, and also I believe the EV tax credit kind of getting pulled. But nonetheless, that's Lucid burning through a lot of cash because of that level of uncertainty. And then there was also some random things that did happen. And so during the earnings call, when I was live streaming, I mentioned it a little bit better, but in regards to the Gravity. So they kind of alluded to why there wasn't a significant ramp up in Q2. And supposedly it was because of all things, magnets. Yes, you heard me right. If you did not listen to the earnings call, magnets surprisingly was a very hot topic. Supposedly they didn't have enough. And so one thing that I really didn't like, and so throughout this earnings, Mark is trying to portray Lucid as not just a automaker. They are a tech play. And so for a tech play, you have to explain things in a proper format. So when they were mentioning that there wasn't enough magnets for the Gravity, they said that their team magically was able to get it figured out and fix a problem. So going forward is not a problem. But how does that happen? How do you magically fix a issue like that? Did Harry Potter come, work for Lucid, do his little magic crap, and fix all of it? Like, coming from a tech play, I've never heard any CEO ever mention, hey, we just, pulled some magic out of a hat and things worked out. That is not how you answer it. And I think just generally speaking, like I mentioned during the live stream as well, that all of this and even their speeches sounded like a high school presentation, that it was done the night before. All of this, nobody sounded like they wanted to be there. I barely wanted to be there. It was horrible. Even one of the analysts, it sounded like he was at Starbucks. Analysts did not care at all, didn't ask questions. And just as I was always complaining about, Cantor Fitzgerald, Andre Shepard, honestly is the biggest clown at all. Like, he literally, asked the stupidest fucking question. Oh, sorry for my French. But yeah, honestly, analysts were just like, what the hell is going on with this company? I'm just going to go get Starbucks. You just keep doing your thing. That's basically it. And two analysts that have been in and covering Lucid since the very, very beginning, Adam Jonas with Morgan Stanley and what's his name? John Murphy with Bank of America, they didn't even bother to join this earnings. They didn't care. Analysts are not caring. So most likely I will kind of put this forward. I do feel that we're going to get a lot of $1 and possibly a couple $1.50 ratings. Don't anticipate anything like $4, $5. That is off the table. And I think one very big negative about their earnings, which is something I've brought up in the past, is catalysts. And I know this has gotten me a lot of hate in the past. Like in 2023, I've been covering Lucid for a while, but 2023, I started to bring up a lot of negatives. People don't like hearing negatives at all. They'd rather just hear positives. So I got kind of shamed and said I'm FUD and all that other stuff. But like, if you think about it, back in 2023, the Gravity was supposed to be out. When they moved it, they pretty much didn't. They had a gap. They had a gap where there was no catalyst. And what happens to a stock with no catalyst? Tends to go down. Because if you think about it, why is someone going to hold their money into a stock that's burning through a lot of cash when opportunity cost, they can move it to Palantir, earn double-digit growth, triple-digit growth, that kind of mentality. So the fact that throughout this earnings, they kept signaling the mid-size, 2026, 2026, there is no real catalyst from now up until mid-size. And even the Touring, which I would have thought, so the Gravity Touring, $79.9, good price point, they didn't even bring that up themselves. A analyst asked, hey, what's up with the Touring? That's when Mark mentioned that it will be in Q1 2026. Lucid had no intention of even bringing up their next model of the Gravity. So Lucid management sounded like they didn't want to be there. They didn't even give closing remarks. So they honestly just said, F this, I'm out. Like, I just want to end this, which makes sense. But analysts didn't even want to be there. And so, yeah, I think just overall as a entirety, this earnings was probably hands down. I can honestly say that this was one of the worst ones, even under Peter. And Peter had some pretty sketchy earnings in the past, but this takes a cake. And I think a lot of that has to do with also Mark really kind of just amping up people, saying, hey, we have a good catalyst, hey, pay attention, this is going to be cool, like really good stuff. You even went on Bloomberg to say that, but turns out, of all things, like magnets were the real issue why Gravity didn't ramp up. So yeah, that's pretty much a good Cole's Notes version of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I know this is a little bit more overwhelmingly negative, so I'm already going to get some comments. I already had some comments in my live stream saying, hey, Cal is short. I'm not short. Not at all. I always like to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you're thinking I'm shorting, you're basically the same type of people that hated me back in 2023 because I was calling out Lucid's clearly blatant red flags. And right now, this is a very similar scenario to that, because what is the next big catalyst for them to ramp up? Yeah, could be, but they even kind of sound like they're ditching the Gravity and really focusing on the midsize. Midsize is going to be the big thing for Lucid, but yeah, it's just a very bad earnings. So hopefully with this being kind of the rock bottom, we can kind of have higher highs going into the foreseeable future, 2026 and whatever else. But as far as today, I'm filming this overnight on a side note, but my prediction for Wednesday, how the market's going to take the earnings, I feel like it will touch this 207. So that's going to be the next strong support. Realistically, do I feel like it's going to go below that and stay below? Not really. I think it'll kind of hit this, might go slightly below, but it will pull a little bit higher and close above that 207, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I think this definitely wasn't all that great. And actually, there was one negative also that did come out, and that is the reverse stock split. Dun, dun, dun. So very bad reverse stock split, and it was just very weird wording. And so technically they mentioned that Lucid plans on doing the reverse stock split in September if they get enough votes. That literally was the wording. So it's like, hey, we already know we're going to do it here if we get the votes, wink, wink. And as I've already explained, like, technically it's a done deal. I know some people might disagree with me on that, and whatever, that's fine. But the PIF has majority stake. So if the PIF's on board, Lucid gets a reverse stock split. Lucid's tone already sounds like they know that they have the reverse stock split, and they're planning for it to be early September. So just if you are curious on what that means for your shares, your average and everything, just do a little bit of a deeper dive, due diligence, and all the other fun jazz. But looks like reverse stock split is going to be going forward. So let me know your thoughts on Lucid, and was there any other positives or negatives that I might have kind of missed potentially? But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I got the good summarization of everything. So let me know your viewpoint. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And then one final thing, pop over to my Patreon. I give buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.